Have you ever wondered what society would look like without any rules? Or maybe more importantly, without referees to enforce those rules? I mean, picture a game with no one to call a foul, no one to keep things fair. It would just be chaos, right? Well, today, we're diving deep into the legal framework that protects those very referees, the people we call persons in authority, and by extension, the very delicate game of civil order itself. We are going to unpack the laws that draw that fine, crucial line between lawful protest and illegal defiance.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First up, we're going to identify the key players. Who exactly does the law wrap its arms around and protect? Then, we'll get into the fouls, from the really aggressive stuff like direct and indirect assaults, all the way to the more subtle moves like resistance and just plain ignoring a summons. And to wrap it all up, we'll take a look at the scoreboard. What's the actual price of defiance? Let's jump in.
So before we can even begin to understand the penalties and the fouls, we've got to know who the players are. Specifically, who are the players wearing those special jerseys that grant them legal protection? This first section is all about defining that inner circle, the individuals who get this shield from the law. And it's not because of who they are as people, but because of the absolutely critical roles they play in just keeping our society from falling apart.
This right here is the million-dollar question, and the answer is probably a lot broader than you think. You see, the law is incredibly specific about this because it's not just about who's wearing a badge or sitting behind a big wooden desk with a gavel. You really have to think of these individuals as the main referees in this huge, complicated game of society. They are the ones who are officially empowered to make the calls.
Okay, the magic words here are directly vested. This is so important. It means their authority isn't just borrowed or temporary, it's hardwired directly into the legal system. Think of it like this. They have their own power source. They're plugged right into the main grid. This gives them jurisdiction, the official power to make decisions and enforce the rules in their area. It comes from the law itself, not from another person. They don't have to ask for permission to act. Their role is the permission.
Now look at this list, because it really shows you just how broad this idea is. Yeah, of course, you've got judges and elected officials, but the law also stretches this protection to include teachers trying to maintain order in a classroom, or lawyers arguing a case in court. And why is that? It's because in those specific moments, they are upholding the rules of their domain. They're acting as guardians of order. An attack on a professor during a lecture isn't just seen as an attack on that person, it's an attack on the whole institution of education and the order it represents. See? The protection follows the function, not just the job title.
Okay, so if persons in authority are the head referees, we know they can't be everywhere at once. It's just not possible. They need a team, right? And that is exactly where their agents come in. You can think of them as the line judges, the assistant referees, the whole support system that helps the main official control the game right there on the ground.
These agents are really the front lines of public order. Now, unlike a person in authority whose power is kind of baked into their role, an agent's authority is usually delegated to them. They're given a specific job to do on the ground. Their purpose is super clear: help the main referee manage the day-to-day flow of the game and make sure the rules are being followed where all the action is actually happening.
So this covers your local officials, your police officers, but check out that last point. It's a really crucial, dynamic part of the law. Anyone lawfully coming to the aid of a person in authority. Just imagine this. You see a single police officer trying to make a lawful arrest, but the suspect is getting violent and resisting. If you step in to help that officer, to help restrain the suspect, in that very moment, the law kind of temporarily deputizes you. You become an agent, and an attack on you would be treated just like an attack on an agent of authority. It's the law's way of encouraging everyday citizens to help maintain order by throwing its protective shield over them when they do. Let's move on to our next section, because you can see how this all builds on itself. We've clearly defined our referees and their assistants. So now, let's talk about the most severe foul you can commit against them, the kind that gets you an immediate red card. We're talking about a direct, head-on assault.
We're looking right at Article 148 now, the one that defines direct assault, and it's so important to get this. This isn't just treated like some simple scuffle. When you assault a person in authority who's on the job, the law sees it as something way more sinister. It's an attack not just on that person, but on the entire system of order and justice they represent. You're not just tackling a person, you are tackling the rule book itself.
For a prosecutor to make a case for a crime this serious, they basically have to check 4 boxes. Think of it like building a case, piece by piece. First, the act itself. Did the person actually do the forbidden thing? Second, the mental blueprint. What was going on in their head? The law cares a lot about intent. An accidental bump is worlds away from a deliberate shove. Third, the circumstances. Was the official actually performing their duties? Context is absolutely everything. And finally, the resulting harm. Did this act actually undermine public order? To get a conviction, the answer to all four has to be a solid yes.
So this crime really comes in two flavors. The first one is a really serious challenge to the state itself, using force to, say, try to stop Congress from passing a law, but without it being a full-blown rebellion. The second flavor is way more common, a direct physical fight. And the condition here is the key to the whole thing. The official has to be performing their duties, like a traffic cop writing a ticket, or the attack has to be revenge for something they did in their official capacity, like someone ambushing a judge at the grocery store because they didn't like a verdict from last week. The law protects not just the act of authority, but the person who has to carry it out.
Now, not all direct assaults are treated the same. The law levels up the crime to aggravated if certain lines get crossed, and believe me, the penalties get a lot steeper. Using a weapon, that's an obvious one. But look at the others. If the attacker is a public officer themselves, the law sees that as a huge betrayal of public trust. And that third one is very specific, if the offender lays hands upon a person in authority. Physically touching a judge or a commission member is seen as a much more severe symbolic act of defiance than just attacking one of their agents, because it's a direct challenge to the very source of that jurisdiction.
But what if you're clever enough not to attack the referee directly? What if instead you attack the person who rushes onto the field to help the ref after they've been knocked down? Well, that is precisely what our next section, based on Article 149, is all about. This is the crime of attacking the allies of authority.
The logic here is really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. This is basically the law that protects the Good Samaritan. If a police officer is being assaulted and a bystander decides to step in and help, this article throws a legal shield around that bystander. And why does it do that? To make sure that authority figures aren't left isolated and alone. It's a way to incentivize public cooperation by sending a really clear message. If you stand up for public order, the law will stand up for you.
Let's keep moving. So far, we've been talking about physical violence, about assault. But you can challenge authority and create chaos without ever throwing a single punch. You can do it with a simple but powerful act of saying no. And this is where Article 151, which covers the crimes of resistance and disobedience, enters the picture. You know, the law actually has a lot of nuance here. It gets that not all acts of saying no are created equal, so creates two different tiers. On one side, you have serious disobedience. This is when you're actively resisting or just flat-out disobeying a lawful order. And you can do this to a high-level person in authority or their agent. But on the other side, you have non-serious disobedience, which is a lesser crime that, and this is the key, only applies when you're disobeying an agent. So refusing a judge's direct order to be quiet in court, that's always going to be serious. But maybe arguing with a traffic enforcer for half a minute before you move your car, that might be considered non-serious. The level of your defiance and the rank of the person you defy both matter a whole lot.
Now we're going to talk about a totally different kind of defiance. This battle isn't fought on the streets with fists or with words of resistance. Nope. This is a battle of paperwork, of procedure, of power. Article 150 deals with what happens when you decide to just ignore a formal, legal summons from the highest deliberative bodies in the land. It's about trying to use a paper shield to block an official investigation.
This article is what gives bodies like Congress their legal muscle. Just imagine a congressional committee is investigating some massive corporate fraud that caused people their life savings. They summon the company's CFO to testify and demand all the internal financial records. If that CFO just refuses to show up, or shows up and refuses to be sworn in, or says, "No, I'm not giving you those documents," they could be violating this very article. It even covers trying to stop a whistleblower from coming forward. This law is absolutely fundamental to accountability. Without it, all that oversight is just a polite suggestion.
Okay, so we have walked through the entire playbook of fouls, from violent physical assaults to quiet procedural defiance. We've defined all the crimes. So now it is time to turn to the scoreboard and see what the consequences actually are. This is the final tally, where we lay everything out side by side and compare the penalties for each and every offense.
This table right here lays out the crystal clear hierarchy of these offenses. It's like a ladder of severity. And if you look at the penalties, it tells you exactly what the legal system values most when it's protecting public order. Right at the very top, with a potential prison sentence of up to 6 years, you've got aggravated direct assault, a violent armed challenge to authority. The penalties then drop for a standard assault, and then they drop again, pretty significantly, when we move away from physical confrontation and into disobedience. You'll see that serious disobedience and defying a summons are treated with pretty similar weight,
both carrying a penalty of up to 6 months. And then way down at the bottom, with a maximum of just 30 days, is a minor act of disobedience to an agent. This slide is basically your map to the consequences of challenging the rules of the game.
And that brings us to our final and maybe our most important thought for the day. You see, these laws, they're not designed to create a society of silent, unquestioning people. They exist in a democracy that's supposed to value accountability and free speech. The crucial thread that's woven through all of these articles is that the law protects the performance of a lawful duty. And that leaves us with a really vital and ongoing question to think about. In any given situation, how do we, as citizens, navigate that incredibly delicate and essential line between our right to question and dissent and the crime of unlawfully obstructing an official who is lawfully doing their job? Finding that balance? Well, that's the very heart of a functioning, free society.